Sunny ways, my friends, sunny ways.
How would you describe it?
It's like hell on earth.
Well, you can now find them in every major city across Canada, from Newfoundland to British Columbia. What was once a rare sight is now a common feature throughout our country. Sprawling tent cities where people are desperately clinging to life. They're calling them Trudeau Towns. And seeing as how the policies which have brought such destruction to our country have come from the namesake, there can perhaps be no better name to describe these new pitched-up shanty towns which dot the Canadian urban landscape. Spend any time on social media and you will see countless videos of these Trudeau Towns in every major city. Human rights groups are now calling this situation a human rights crisis. In response, the federal housing minister, Sean Fraser, who flooded this country with uncontrollable levels of immigration while he was the immigration minister, is blaming all of us for the crisis happening in our country. Of course he is. Now, before we get into it, drop a like in the video, help us out by subscribing to the True North YouTube channel, and the comment question for the episode is this: do you blame Justin Trudeau for the shocking rise in the number of tent cities across our country? Let me know your answer in the comments below, and let's get into it. Well, let's take a trip across Canada, shall we? Let's take a look at these Trudeau Towns, which can be found in every province in this country. We start in Newfoundland, outside the Colonial Building in St. John's. Take a look at this here. Local Newfoundland journalist Justin Brake spent some time living in this tent encampment with these homeless people and noted that many of them, unsurprisingly, are addicted to drugs after having suffered severe trauma and intimate partner violence. Many of these people here are women as well. In Gatineau, Quebec, at one of these Trudeau towns, homeless people have been given ice fishing tents to live in during the winter. Practically a luxury compared to what we just saw in Newfoundland. Ex-user Amazing Zoltan, who posted this video, made a strong observation, wondering if the resident in this ice fishing hut tent city, who has a baby stroller, would be eligible for $10 a day Trudeau childcare. Take a look at this tent city, which has been there for quite a while apparently, at St. George's Square in Guelph, Ontario, fittingly right outside of a BMO bank. Now take a look at this side-by-side shot of an intersection in Kitchener, Ontario. In 2021, it was a normal-looking Kitchener intersection. By 2023, it had turned into a sprawling Trudeau town right in the middle of the intersection. Vibrant and stunning, one ex-user commented. Imagine this is happening all over the country and realtors are still pumping the market for higher prices. If it continues, no good will come from it. Hoovervilles, you saw this during the Great Depression. It's happening before our eyes, but full employment and stock markets at all-time highs are masking the problems under the surface. People working, but not making enough to afford to live. Our journey across Canada continues. This time we take a stop at Regina City Hall in Saskatchewan. The CBC interviewed a woman living in this Trudeau town, and her story is really difficult to listen to.
I came here originally just myself with just a shopping cart and a tarp that I had found in the garbage bin. Then I found a tent in the garbage bin as well. I had really lost my way of my path, I guess, and I'm now here with a few friends and my street family. We don't choose to live in tents. The government forces us to, because how else are we going to shelter ourselves from the natural elements of nature?
No matter what you think of the situation that these people are facing or how they got to where they are, the reality is this is not normal for Canada. And just because the United States has to deal with this problem and other countries have to deal with this problem, it doesn't mean that we should allow this situation to take over our cities. One of the most famous Trudeau towns can be found in Kelowna.
Sunny ways, my friends, sunny ways. This is what positive politics can do. This is what a positive, hopeful vision and a platform and a team together can make happen.
This sprawling tent city appears to go on for as far as the eye can see. How about this Trudeau town in Victoria? The CBC went to one of these Trudeau towns in Toronto and interviewed some of the people living in these conditions.
Is this where you live?
Yeah.
Can you show us?
A tent in a downtown park shouldn't have to be anyone's home. But for a growing number of Canadians, this is it.
Not that we're endangering anybody, God forbid, but it's just, it's not normal for people to be living in tents outside in these situations.
As one homeless person rightly indicates, none of this is normal. And of course, this is also dangerous. Crime surges in these Trudeau towns. Drugs proliferate these areas. And sometimes they catch on fire. Now, instead of living in shelters, a lot of people prefer to live in these Trudeau towns because the shelters themselves are in some cases more dangerous than living out in the street. Listen to how one woman living in this Toronto Trudeau town describes what it's like living in this condition.
How would you describe it?
It's like hell on earth.
Now, when asked to comment about this crisis happening across our country, Housing Minister Sean Fraser, instead of assuming personal responsibility, like any good politician, blamed his own people for it, describing it as a generational failure.
You see those encampments. Do you see that as a policy failure, that those encampments exist across Canada?
I think it's a generational moral failure, that there are people who are sleeping without a roof over their head in a country as wealthy as Canada. I will not be able to say with a straight face that I have properly addressed the housing crisis if we still have to walk past people who are sleeping on the streets in Canada. We have to ask ourselves, not just as a government, but as a society, and this includes other levels of government as well, by the way, what kind of country do we want to live in? Do we think it's acceptable to have people who are not able to reach their full potential because they can't find a place to live?
Oh yeah, because we're to blame for the fact that Trudeau towns now occupy major parks in almost every major city. Thanks to a die-hard commitment to mass immigration, the problems faced by Canadians have only gotten worse. Housing is now unaffordable. Inflation is out of control. The standard of living for so many in this country seems to have fallen off a cliff. 1 in 5 single adults in this country are now living in poverty. But is this really a generational failure, or is this a failure of the current federal government? Is it the tens of thousands of migrants who are entering this country at record paces, living in these tent cities? Well, when they were living on the street, the federal government quickly rushed to make sure they could be housed in hotels and spend money to put a roof over their heads. Meanwhile, it's Canadians who are living out in the streets. It is Native people who are living out in the streets. It's our veterans who are living out in the streets. Now, what better way to keep these Canadians living in these awful conditions than to pursue a policy of so-called safe supply, to decriminalize the possession of hard, dangerous drugs. And of course, if these people no longer want to live in these third world conditions in Trudeau towns, well, they can also apply to have themselves killed through the MAID program. The federal government really wants you to know they take this so-called generational problem seriously, despite the fact that they themselves are pretty much solely responsible for this crisis. Their solution now appears to be creating sheds where you can live in. So we're gonna just put a roof over your head and we're just gonna see where it all goes. Take a look at this luxury Trudeau town now in Kelowna. I hope this is the life you envisioned yourself, because it's now coming across the country. Peterborough also did the same thing, and instead of the drab, gray-colored sheds you can live in that luxury Trudeau town, you can live in these sheds, which are colorfully painted. Instead of a nice gated Trudeau town community, you can have a barbed wire fence. But don't worry, I'm sure that will keep out all the drugs and all the crime. I guess we're all just gonna have to chalk this one up as yet another legacy item of the Trudeau government. Sprawling Trudeau tent cities. All right, everyone, that's going to do it for us today on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Harrison Faulkner, and this is Ratioed.